from the headquarters of Telesa English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Emike Omolu. Welcome. The plane from Ecuador carrying Venezuelan migrants as part of the Return to the Homeland program has landed in Caracas. The flight left on Wednesday night filled with migrants who had lined up outside the Venezuelan embassy in Quito for a chance to get on board. President Nicolas Maduro has been facilitating flights across South America for Venezuelan citizens wishing to return home. More flights are expected in the coming days from Ecuador, but also from Peru and Argentina. Deriz Herrera was in Quito's Marcial Sucre airport as the flight left for Caracas.
In the south of Quito, Joyce Mail and her family have packed their bags to finally return to their country after spending time in Ecuador without a job.
La situación de cada quien es diferente.
Each person's situation is different. A professional person might come and not be able to work because of the bureaucracy. I know that firsthand because my daughter had a baby here and they ask for your visa, which takes 6 months to get. And by then they find you $900. It's impossible to stay.
Y te la dan dentro de 6 meses. Y después de 6 meses ya estás multado por $900.
Young people, children, babies and adults have gathered outside the Venezuelan embassy where they shared some of their experience of living in Ecuador.
We have decided to go home and we thank President Nicolás Maduro for providing the plane.
We are going home with our heads held high. Things didn't go well here, but we're returning because it's our country.
The return to homeland plan promoted by President Nicolás Maduro has made it possible for Venezuela citizens to return to home. They have been living in bad conditions and suffer from xenophobia and discrimination. Representatives of the Venezuelan embassy have condemned a political and media strategy against the country, and they also said a meeting will be held in Caracas to discuss the flow of Venezuelan migrants.
Migrating can seem attractive, and there was a huge pull from a tremendous campaign on social media to persuade Venezuelans to live however they could, with promises of work that never materialized. Just ask these people.
As 2 buses arrived at the embassy, it was finally time to go home. Once at the airport, the Venezuelans waited for their flight with big smiles.
We are happy now and very hopeful that we can return home, see our families and take this opportunity to begin a new destiny.
After a flight of just a few hours, these Venezuelan families now have the chance to start again, back in their own country. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Dozens more migrants in Peru lined up outside the Venezuelan embassy on Wednesday night trying to get home. Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, tells us more.
People keep lining up outside the Venezuelan embassy headquarters in Lima. These Venezuelan migrants want to apply for the Return to Your Homeland program. They have different reasons to get back home. For instance, many say they have suffered xenophobia, poor work conditions. They've even been victims of human trafficking. Now they need to do an interview in order to be selected for the different flights organized by the Venezuelan government. Meanwhile, more and more people continue to arrive here to apply.
Jaime Herrera reporting there. Well, a military airplane belonging to the U.S. will be tested in Ecuador. Ecuador's Vice President of Defense, Diego Gomez, has announced the test will start on Thursday. Gomez says the operation will increase the coordination of both countries in the fight against crime. But critics say Ecuador is giving up its sovereignty. The Organization of American States has held an extraordinary meeting to discuss the migration issue in Venezuela. The OAS pushed for Venezuela to accept humanitarian aid, while OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro called on Latin American countries to share the burden and grant legal status to Venezuelan migrants. Venezuela says it wasn't consulted about the meeting and condemned it as another attempt to interfere in its affairs.
Thank you very much. We reject the call for this extraordinary session of the Permanent Council, and again regret the recurring practice of this organization of not consulting at any time or opinion. Once again, this is a sign of hostile and unfriendly attitude of those who called this meeting towards Venezuela. We want to record the vigorous rejection by our Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela of this meeting. It is again being used as a platform to attack our country through a selective and clearly politicized approach to Venezuelan reality. So, we also want to make clear that we reject the meeting, its results, its decisions, and anything else that comes out of it. This will not be applied and will not be of no consequence for us.
Well, the United States has declared Nicaragua's civil unrest a threat to the region's security. However, Nicaragua has rejected that statement. The U.S.'s comments came during a United Nations Security Council meeting. In response, thousands marched in the streets of Managua on Wednesday in support of President Ortega's government. President Daniel Ortega told the demonstrators that the U.S. has a long history of interference in Central America.
We say to the American government, we say to the American Congress members, if they want to contribute to peace in Nicaragua, then respect Nicaragua as a government nation, as a nation that is worthy as any other nation in the world, that deserves respect and that is due respect.
At the debate on the Security Council, Russia and China demanded that the U.S. respect Nicaragua's sovereignty. They said the country is not a threat to international peace and therefore should not be submitted to discussion of any kind. Brazil's federal police are asking that corruption charges be brought against President Michel Temer. If approved, he could be suspended from office. Temer has survived 2 previous attempts to charge him. A federal police report says there is evidence the leader received bribes from construction giant Odebrecht, which is at the heart of a regional corruption scandal. The report will be sent to the Attorney General to evaluate. If she chooses to proceed, 2/3 of the lower house of Congress would have to vote to suspend Temer and put him on trial. The House has twice rejected previous charges against him. Fernando Haddad, the running mate of Brazil's ex-president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in the upcoming election, has been campaigning at a Volkswagen car factory outside of Sao Paulo. He, like Temer, is defending himself against corruption charges.
I've given my position about Alckmin in this regard. I think the public prosecutor is too important to let itself be used. In my case, because of vengeance. The vengeance of a businessman against me. It doesn't make sense. A businessman was harmed. It shouldn't be allowed that institutions are used for electoral ends.
Argentina says it is not seeking an additional loan from the International Monetary Fund or the U.S. Treasury. At the end of 2 days of meetings in Washington, Argentina's finance minister dismissed rumors in the Argentine press about additional funds. Nicolas Duhovny insisted that his talks with the IMF chief were about reformulating the existing $50 billion bailout agreement.
I want to convey to Argentinians that I see with great confidence the progress we've made during these days of talks. I am certain that through the reformulation of the program we are working on, we will be able to leave behind these days of anguish and volatility.
State workers have been demonstrating in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, in support of those fired from state news agency Telam. Our correspondent in Argentina, Edgardo Esteban, has the details.
The state workers are supporting the people who were fired from the state news agency Telam. The press unions are also mobilizing in Buenos Aires to bring awareness to the difficult situation that those fired are suffering. 357 workers were dismissed more than 2 months ago, meaning 40% of the agency's collaborators. There are still no answer from the government of Mauricio Macri. Demonstrators are asking the Federal Secretary of Public Media to respond. 5 people have been reincorporated, but they want to negotiate others to have the same opportunity. People reached the headquarters building of Telam. and they will continue with their struggle until they receive answers from the authorities.
Edgardo Esteban reporting there. Hundreds of Argentinians have also protested against the government decision to cut the budget for the health ministry. Health workers, union members and political and social organization members protested outside the health ministry in Buenos Aires. As part of the ongoing austerity push, the government closed down 11 ministries and cut spending on public policies.
We are here demanding that the Argentine government gives us back the Ministry of Health. People who are suffering from chronic diseases can't live without a ministry. People with HIV, we need to have the guarantee of having antiretroviral in the country.
Time for a short break. Join us in a few moments.
We are African. Culture and tradition is what we are born with.
We might be apart in terms of distance, but we are always together.
We need to love ourselves. Back to Africa.
Sunday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Thousands of students in Mexico have demonstrated against violence after a series of brutal attacks by vigilante groups at the National University.
Students, thousands of them, marching in solidarity with their fellows at the Science and Humanities College, or CCH. They've been attacked by a vigilante group, or porros as they're known in Mexico. The young people blame the college authorities, especially the rector, Enrique Graue.
One group of students was practically kidnapped. A veterinary student was murdered. A high school girl was even killed here. There were robberies at the university. Teachers have been killed. Students have been murdered. There have been shootings right here. We are sick of this.
The response of the rector, who was watching President Peña Nieto's State of the Union address at the time of the attack, has angered even more the student representatives in nearly all the faculties.
We need structural changes that ensure our safety, so that the ones who hired the porros and the porros themselves are brought to justice. And well, we are all here. All the community who Graue said will never protest are here demanding our rights.
This protest was held on the eve of the anniversary of Mexico's most notorious student massacre at Tlatelolco Square in 1968.
Let the university authorities see that we are strong, that we students are capable, and that we haven't forgotten the 43, nor the 68, nor all the history in between.
The young students presented their demands right outside the rector's office. The 44 student councils agreed to meet once the 48-hour strike is over to decide what action the student movement will take next.
Thousands of Colombians have protested in Bogota against the murders of social leaders. The demonstrators gathered outside Congress to demand a stop to the killings. Some 160 social leaders and human rights defenders have been murdered in Colombia this year. Lawmakers were debating the issue and asking the government to introduce measures to prevent the slaughter. The ELN guerrillas have freed 3 soldiers in an attempt to restart peace talks with Colombia's new government. The 3 soldiers were detained by the ELN in early August. On Tuesday, the insurgent group announced that it would release the detained in an effort to resume peace talks with the government. To mark International Indigenous Women's Day, Colombia remembered the key role its ancestral matriarchs played in the country's peace process. However, the day also called attention to the numerous human rights abuses still endured by Indigenous women.
The blending of Colombian and Caribbean folk rhythms, songs performed with the unmistakable stamp of their own native languages. It's the musical intro to conversations about the significant contributions Indigenous women have made. Yet today, many still face social exclusion and sexual abuse.
Since the conquest, they first touched the indigenous women. It was for sex, and they took them away from their men, their families, and then they went after their native languages. This was a way to violate women's rights.
Indigenous women still lack opportunities, forced displacement, and sexual violence. Their fundamental rights to education, health, and even life itself are often denied.
A growing number of indigenous women arrive in cities and in municipalities without food. Their children suffer. Many die.
4 indigenous women leaders have been murdered in 2018.
The situation is grave. The government is not paying attention to these issues and they're not ensuring our safety.
Despite adversity, Indigenous women will continue the struggle to defend their lives, their territory, and their ancestral knowledge. They also strive to protect Pachamama, or Mother Earth, and the construction of peace in Colombia.
El Salvador's ruling party, the FMLN, is about to hold its 36th summit. The party's presidential hopeful, Hugo Martinez, and his running mate, Karina Sosa, are hoping to create a development plan that will benefit all. Ernesto Avalas has the details.
This Sunday, September 9th, the 36th FMLN summit will be taking place. The candidates for presidency and vice presidency for the 2019 elections will be announced. Former Foreign Minister Hugo Martinez and former Congresswoman Karina Sosa are aspiring to the presidency and vice presidency. Women, children, and members of the FMLN have also been invited. There, they will discuss the government plan for the 2019-2024 period. This could be the third government of the FMLN. The candidate, Hugo Martinez and Karina Sosa, are open to hear to the needs of the Salvadorian people in order to create a government plan that benefits all.
Ernesto Avalos reporting there. Well, communities on the border between El Salvador and Guatemala are campaigning against contamination from mining operations. They fear the reopening of the Cerro Blanco mine will be an environmental nightmare.
Inhabitants of Asunción Mita in the municipality of Jutiapa in the south of Guatemala are bracing for the impact. The Cerro Blanco mine was closed 18 years ago. Now it's being operated by Canadian company Bluestone Resources.
We are in a region that is considered one of the zones of natural arsenic content. But with all the mining that is taking place, they are damaging the health of its inhabitants in Guatemala and El Salvador.
The mining project also poses a threat to the Ostor River. It's the main water source in El Salvador.
The groundwater reserves will also be contaminated by chemicals and heavy equipment that the mine will use.
The mine covers an area of approximately 14 square kilometers. A recent study revealed that it contains more than 1 million ounces of gold and silver. Environmentalists say the mining is destructive and water pollution is a real concern that cannot be ignored. They say these issues do not seem to worry transnationals like Bluestone, who take advantage of the weakness of the region's governments.
And as we have seen, the mine is situated on the border with El Salvador, making it one of the most affected areas.
In El Salvador, Metallic mining has been prohibited since March of 2017. Meanwhile, in Guatemala, the laws are still weak. There are 386 licenses of extractive projects, of which 168 are of metallic mining.
Paraguay has announced it will move its embassy back to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem. Paraguay's Foreign Affairs Minister made the announcement a little more than 3 months after the embassy was transferred to Jerusalem. Paraguay's new president, Mario Abdo Benitez, took the decision, citing his desire to contribute to peace in the region.
Paraguay wants to contribute to the intensification of regional and international diplomatic efforts in order to achieve a wide, fair and lasting peace in the Middle East.
Well, soon after the announcement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the closure of Israel's embassy in Paraguay. An official statement released via Twitter expressed great concern over Paraguay's decision and questioned ongoing bilateral relations. Time for another short break now. Join us in a few moments.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. The China-Africa Cooperation Summit has concluded and many African leaders praised the outcome. We've talked to a Kenyan development economist about the significance of the summit.
I think the significance of FOCAC is that it came during a time when Sino-African relations were really being scrutinized in the context of debt. We've always seen Sino-African relations being scrutinized, particularly by Europe and North America. And I think the signal that the Chinese government wanted to communicate to Africa first and to the world second is that they have a smart way and they're beginning to come up with the solutions to some of the problems that are emerging in Sino-African relations. And I think that was very important in terms of helping people understand that the engagement between China and Africa is not static, that it's always evolving, and that will be the way it will continue to be going forward.
And she also told us that she does not believe that China is engaging in any sort of debt trap diplomacy. On the contrary, she says it is the African governments who have an appetite for debt.
So the debt trap diplomacy narrative is just the newest version of the xenophobic narrative. So as an economist sitting in Africa, I'm like, well, what will the next one be? Because as I said before, this xenophobic narrative seems less concerned with what Africa is going through and seems more focused on painting China as the bad guy, because there seems to be this ideological warfare for the hearts and minds of Africans.
The presidents of North and South Korea have agreed to hold the third interKorean summit later this month. The denuclearization of the region will be top of the agenda. The discussion will also focus on breaking the stalemate between the United States and North Korea regarding the latter's nuclear program. The meeting will be held in Pyongyang, North Korea, on the 18th of September. A 6.6 magnitude earthquake has hit the Japanese island of Hokkaido, killing at least 8 people and destroying homes. The powerful quake triggered landslides, leaving dozens of people missing. An estimated 3 million homes are without power after a thermal plant was damaged by the quake. A government spokesman said the relief effort will be stepped up with around 40,000 rescue workers. An art installation in the Spanish town of Hokkaido allows visitors to jump onto a trampoline adorned with a picture of Donald Trump. People climbed a short flight of stairs to take a dive onto a mat imprinted with a giant picture of the US president. The festival's theme this year is post-conflict, and exhibitors believe that there is no one better to illustrate the theme than Donald Trump.
The artists Dutchman Eric Kessels and Thomas Melender say that jumping on the face of the most powerful man in the world gives you a feeling of liberation and catharsis that, even if only for some seconds, makes you feel as if you are taking revenge against him. So it does seem to have permeated, because this has had a lot of repercussion.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for Telesur English. I'm Emike Omolu, and thank you again for watching.